So this section is entitled The Altar of God. It's a symbol that is used throughout the Course of Miracles, but it's one that takes a bit of working with to get past the physical representation of an altar until you realize that they're talking about a spiritual experience that you can have within yourself. And so we'll elaborate on what the altar is as we get into it. The first paragraph refers to some materials that were in the previous section. So we're going to review a paragraph from the previous section before we get started. Hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader today is Julie C. So Julie, I probably surprised you here. You have to read that first paragraph. Well,
the atonement is a total commitment. You may still think this is associated with loss, a mistake all the separated sons of God make in one way or another. It is hard to believe a defense that cannot attack is the best defense. This is what is meant by the meek shall inherit the earth. They will literally take it over because of their strength.
So we read in the previous section that in this world, because of fears and sense of inadequacy, we construct a set of intellectual, psychological, and emotional armature, defenses, ways of responding to situations because we're afraid. And those defenses actually serve to keep the ego intact. It's an effort to try to protect the ego so that the illusions can be perpetuated and maintained. And there in that previous section, we learned that the atonement is also a defense mechanism, but it's the only one that cannot attack and therefore is the best defense of all. And in this sense, defense, we mean a place within your being where you feel safe and secure and trusting. And so everyone needs to have a sense of safety, security, and trusting. And the atonement is the way in which the Creator has provided that we can feel safe and secure. So with that, we'll go on to the new material.
The atonement can only be accepted within you by releasing the inner light. Since the separation, defenses have been used almost entirely to defend against the atonement, and thus maintain the separation. This is generally seen as a need to protect the body. The many body fantasies in which minds engage arise from the distorted belief that the body can be used as a means for attaining atonement. Perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step in correcting this distortion, because it alters only part of it. It does recognize that atonement in physical terms is impossible. The next step, however, is to realize that a temple is not a structure at all. Its true holiness lies at the inner altar around which the structure is built. The emphasis on beautiful structures is a sign of the fear of atonement and an unwillingness to reach the altar itself. The real beauty of the temple cannot be seen with the physical eye. Spiritual sight, on the other hand, cannot see the structure at all because it is perfect vision. It can, however, see the altar with perfect clarity.
There's a lot there in that paragraph. I counted at least 6 ideas that I'd like to point out, and probably a few more. So let's take them in the order in which they appear. First of all, we're talking about the atonement, the recognition of your place in the plan of creation. Your part is essential to God's plan for salvation. The atonement is the recognition of your essential contribution to that plan and a feeling of oneness with it. That plan can only be accepted within you by allowing the inner light that was gifted to you in your creation to be released. For in other words, you have to participate in the experience of releasing the inner light. And when you do so, you become at one with the atonement. It's a total acceptance of God's plan for creation. And so it's more than a set of ideas and a theory. It's an experience. But as we shall read, the ego has spent its entire life trying to prevent our acceptance of the atonement. So this idea of accepting it should not be taken for granted. We have to overcome the barriers ego puts in the way in order to accept the atonement for ourselves. Defensives have been entirely to defend against the atonement and thus maintain the separation. And then in that defenses that the ego puts up to maintain the separation, level confusion comes into play and attention gets redirected towards the role of the body in all these matters when that is not the center of gravity of the atonement. And so what it means is it's a distorted belief that the body can be used for attaining atonement. This is level confusion. This is not where you experience the atonement. And so we want to talk about that, the role of the body in the process of accepting atonement. So then it introduces a couple ideas of the body as a temple for something that is held within. This is the first step in correcting level confusion, this distortion. But it's only the first step. It's not a complete. It does recognize the atonement in physical terms as impossible. So we're correcting that level distortion. I can't atone, become at one with the universe through some kind of body action or body mechanism. But there's more. The next step is to realize that the temple for the holiness within you is not really a structure at all. I think I'm a little confused on some of the details here, but know that this is true, that within you there is a true holiness. And if we were to think about where is that true holiness, we would say that it lies at the inner altar within you. This is a spiritual concept that within you there is a experience in which you can meet your maker, in which you have an encounter with your maker. That is at your inner altar. That's where your own inherent holiness encounters the Creator, and there's a possibility to become at one with it. So we're talking about now in the idealized case, your holiness recognizes the Creator and offers the atonement as your gift to the Creator, your acceptance of the atonement is the only gift that we can give to the Creator. And then as a result of all that, we identify with the experience and become at one with it. So after the level confusion is cleared, it becomes obvious that the temple can't be seen with the physical eye. We're not talking about organs within your body, or it's okay. Many people wanted to locate this in their heart, but it's not in the organ of your heart. Although if somebody wants to believe that, it's fine. But we're talking about a spiritual experience in which the depth of your being is involved. Spiritual sight cannot see these structures at all. However, spiritual sight can see the altar within with perfect clarity. So this is a true statement that is not confused about levels. Spiritual sight perceives this inner experience of your being at the altar to the Creator with perfect clarity. Okay, so this is not meant to be the entire story. There's more. We'll go on.
For perfect effectiveness, the atonement belongs at the center of the inner altar, where it undoes the separation and restores the wholeness of mind. Before the separation, the mind was invulnerable to fear because fear did not exist. Both the separation and the fear are miscreations that must be undone for the restoration of the temple and for the opening of the altar to receive the atonement. This heals the separation by placing within you the one effective defense against all separation thoughts and making you perfectly invulnerable.
So many of the things that we will be discussing in this session are like the rest of the Course of Miracles. It's probably easier to understand at the end after we've gone all the way through it, and then you come back and understand the pieces. But right in here is embedded some of the clues that you'll need. So what we've talked about, the inner altar to the Creator, the atonement, your acceptance of the plan of creation for perfect oneness, that's what belongs at the inner altar. Now I want to flip to the dark side for a second, the ego side, and tell you that the ego wants to bring idols to the altar. So it wants you to be preoccupied with your own self-deceptions, your own illusions, and become enamored, fall in love with your own idols, and bring them to the altar. Make them your gods. Worship your idols. That's what an idol is. It's something that one falsely worships. So now back to the truthful side of the equation. The atonement's what belongs at the center of the altar, but the ego wants you to make the mistake of valuing other things more, putting the things of this world, the illusions and self-deceptions of this world at the altar. So it's a choice. The power of decision is your own. You get to decide what you will bring to your altar. And if you bring the atonement to the altar, it undoes the separation and reunites your consciousness with the plan of creation. the wholeness of mind, it heals the split mind. If you bring idols to your altar, it maintains the separation. So it's a choice to bring self-deceptions. This is ego concepts of a limited little self to the altar, and to try to promote your plan instead of the creator's, or to be willing to have all that set aside and undone so that you come what I would call spiritually naked to the altar, empty handed, with an open mind and a gladful heart. You come with nothing so that you can receive everything. And when we do so, it restores the wholeness of the mind. This is what heals. This heals the separation by placing within you the one effective defense, which is the atonement, the one effective defense against all separation thoughts. And this is what makes you perfectly invulnerable. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. You realize that there is nothing in this world, nor in all of time and space, which can disrupt your relationship to the creator and creation. You are invulnerable. You were created perfectly and in perfect oneness and will remain so forever. The acceptance of the atonement is allowing all of that to penetrate your conscious mind so that there's no barriers in your consciousness to that fact. So our role is to undo the confusion of what we place at the altar. We'll explore this some more. So I'm getting ahead of my skis here. We'll go on. Oh, Julie, I'm sorry, you're muted there.
The acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time. This may appear to contradict free will because of the inevitability of the final decision, but this is not so. You can temporize, and you are capable of enormous procrastination, but you cannot depart entirely from your Creator, who set the limits on your ability to miscreate. An imprisoned will engenders a situation which, in the extreme, becomes altogether intolerable. Tolerance for pain may be high, but it is not without limit. Eventually, everyone begins to recognize, however dimly, that there must be a better way. As this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a turning point. This ultimately reawakens spiritual vision, simultaneously weakening the investment in physical sight. The alternating investment in the two levels of perception is usually experienced as conflict, which can become very acute. But the outcome is as certain as God.
Mm-hmm. So there's a number of ideas here, which again are fundamental. It really describes the journey that all of us take, everyone. So let's begin at the beginning, the beginning of the separation. And we have the concept here, the idea of an imprisoned will. This is your willpower diminished with constraints placed on it that would cause you to look out at life through the lens of illusions and use your willpower improperly to miscreate. This is an imprisoned will. I've not seen this term used elsewhere outside of Course in Miracles. I'm open to discovering somewhere else where that is discussed. Free will is willpower that is used in alignment with the one will of creation and therefore is free to create. We were created to be co-creators with God, and to be free in that. But to do so means we have to undo all the beliefs that the ego has set in front of us about separation and fear and guilt and judgment and attack, et cetera, et cetera. So the result of an imprisoned will is that it makes you miserable and in the extreme becomes altogether intolerable. And people can learn to live with a lot of pain, but eventually they reach their limit. And this can become a turning point. This is a key concept. You see this in recovery a lot. People that were obsessively compulsive, repeated the same habits for much of their life and eventually reach a point in which they surrender and their lives have become unmanageable and they alter the direction of their lives. It becomes a turning point. Why? Because the pain becomes so high, and they realize there has to be another way, and they start looking for another way. Little footnote here. We did not say that you must hit bottom to begin changing the direction. We do say that many people do wait until they get so desperate and then they change direction. So it becomes a turning point, which starts a new direction that ultimately reawakens spiritual vision. And I'll hold off on the final comment here. Julie, you had your comment?
Thank you, Jonica. As with so many paragraphs that we read, this one for me is a great parallel to 12-step learning and literature. And thinking about the inner prison that we would talk about here makes me think of self-will run riot in the other place, which is how I would explain imprisoned will over there.
Yes.
And I do think it's fascinating that the course doesn't talk about the importance of a bottom. Other programs sometimes do, and it's interesting. Like for me, just my experience in the other area was considered a relatively high bottom if you wanted to talk about maybe the primary criterion for membership. But spiritually, for me, it was a frighteningly low bottom. And I know, at least for me, in this version of the illusion, I think I am somebody who kind of tends to fight a little bit. And so I think that's my experience, that I need to be at a place where I'm suffering pretty well before I'm going to be willing to face the fear that it takes to believe in a solution like the atonement. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. It really does vary with individuals. Strong-willed, you said will run a riot, tends to want to keep on going in the direction it's in until it cannot tolerate it anymore. But what we're saying is, while that is true for many people, it really hinges upon the idea that somebody starts looking for a better way. It hinges upon a willingness to make a decision to change course, whether you hit a brick wall or you come up short of the brick wall and change before that. It varies with the individual. So once you do change direction, this is a key point. That means that you have an old habit of heading towards a brick wall, and now you have a spiritual turning point that would cause you to steer away from the brick wall. And this alternating investment in the two levels of perception is, do I continue to do what I've always done, or do I form a new set of habits that take me in a different direction? Is a period of oscillation or vacillation, which can be usually experienced as conflict, which can become very acute. By the way, in A Course in Miracles, I've witnessed a number of people very enthusiastic for the first 6 months, and they reach this acute period of conflict between the old and the new, and it's too much, and many stop because that conflict between my past and what I'm becoming in the moment is so strong that they are unable to muster the willpower to continue forward, and so they drop out. So obviously, we would encourage you. I don't think anyone that's attending this live session needs help with that, but this does happen to many people. What the Course recommends is that you take the next step forward in the direction of healing, as a way out of the conflict. All right, we'll go on.
Spiritual vision literally cannot see error and merely looks for atonement. All solutions the physical eye seeks dissolve. Spiritual vision looks within and recognizes immediately that the altar has been defiled and needs to be repaired and protected. Perfectly aware of the right defense, it passes over all others, looking past error to truth. Because of the strength of its vision, it brings the mind into its service. This reestablishes the power of the mind and makes it increasingly unable to tolerate delay, realizing that it only adds unnecessary pain. As a result, the mind becomes increasingly sensitive to what it once would have regarded as very minor intrusions of discomfort.
There's so much to be learned from every paragraph. I know that for me, this paragraph speaks volumes. So I do want to spend a moment breaking it apart. I have to address this concept of defiling your own inner altar. I'm not happy to do this, but this is part of the program. It's the concept of making your treasure the objects of temporary situations in this world, the making the ego's illusions into your idols and falling in love with them. This can be a substance, this can be a person, these can be a set of material objects or experiences. It has many, many forms. All of them are things that you find in this world, and none of them can you take with you when you leave. So, when one makes that your primary motivation, it becomes your idol. And so to speak, you covet that thing above all else. and place it on your own altar. And this is an error. This is a miscreation, which then means that you've quote defiled your altar and misused it. And so that's the error. Now, many people get afraid when they hear this. No need to be afraid, because there's a solution to it, which is the atonement, which is perfectly aware of the right defense, and realizes that it's a willingness to let go of our self-deceptions and bring the one true gift that is worthy to the altar. It's your willingness to accept the plan of atonement, to accept your part in the plan of creation. So that's a big insight there. And let me spend a moment. So Julie, can you read this footnote? Well, I'm sorry, it might be harder for you to do on your phone. I'll read it. So this, again, we're continuing on the theme of defiling the altar. What do we mean by that? If you recognize that all attack which you perceive is in your own mind and nowhere else, you will have at last placed its source, and where it began, it must end. For in this place also lies salvation. We're talking about your altar. The altar of God, where Christ abideth, is there. So real vision is obscured because you cannot endure to see your own defiled altar. We'll come back to that. But since the altar has been defiled, this fact becomes doubly dangerous unless you perceive it. The perception is totally non-threatening because the atonement is the answer to all this. So what are we saying? Is the ego would have you worship idols and think that entirely fine. And then it becomes doubly dangerous because you have not perceived that you've made idols into your demigods. And the ego would confuse our mind with regards to this relationship to our inner holiness. Let me say that again. We're talking about your encounter with the holiness of your own being. The ego would obviously want to keep you apart from that recognition, and would want to keep you so that you never perceive any barriers in that relationship. Well, the atonement is the solution to all of this. It's the exchange. It's a willingness to say, you know, these self-deceptions I've had really were child's toys. I'm willing to now undo them and let them go so that I might get back with the original plan, the original mission, plan of atonement. When we do that, when we make the decision to accept the atonement for ourselves, now this is the breakthrough for me. That decision brings the mind into the service of the atonement. This is deep. We'll talk about it in a minute. This is about levels. The decision to accept the atonement, which is a choice of your soul, the decision to accept the atonement brings the mind, your conscious mind, into the service of the atonement, which then reestablishes the power of the mind, and which makes the mind increasingly unable to tolerate lovelessness and to endure unnecessary pain, one becomes unwilling to continue with the same numbing out pain that was normal before. So the mind becomes increasingly sensitive to what would have once regarded as a minor intrusion, as discomfort. I, yeah, this, I know for a fact this happens. I've experienced this things, and many people on recovery programs of all kind would not consider going back to the behaviors that once they repeated on a regular basis. Why? Because that kind because their mind has become so sensitive to what am I doing? What am I here for? What's my purpose? It's unwilling to tolerate those miscreations, those side trails that would lead us into nowhere. Okay, so everyone has defiled their altar to some point. If it goes unrecognized, that keeps it in place. And so the healing moment becomes when we realize it needs to be repaired and protected. And the right way to do so, the answer has already been given. You don't need to be clever. You just need to release the idols and accept the atonement for yourself, which then brings the conscious mind, which is at a lower level than your soul, it brings the conscious mind into a new relationship that it's working and servicing the plan of atonement, the plan of your soul, rather than the plan of your body or the plan of the external world. That reestablishes the power of the mind, which is an amazing, that is the shift that we all need. And when that experiences, which unfolds over time, this is not like in 1 hour it happens and forever change. This is a opens up and unfolds over weeks and months and years, perhaps. That experience is mightily confirming of the power that was always within us. So we said that the altar cannot be seen with the physical eyes. That is true. We said also that the spiritual eye does not see the body or structures at all. It's not concerned with the material world, the external world. It's only concerned with its purpose and the plan of creation. And so trying to imagine what that is probably something we should not put a lot of effort into. Imagine, what does it look like? What is it? It's more of a childlike trust that I have an inner holiness within me, and everyone has that inner holiness within them. And there is a purpose to that inner holiness, and my mind accepting it and becoming grateful for it, thankful, grateful for it, and identifying with the inner holiness, that is our part to play, not defining it. So this is why we don't try to put a definition of the inner altar. It's a spiritual phenomena that cannot be seen or even described adequately with words. Julie?
The children of God are entitled to the perfect comfort that comes from perfect trust. Until they achieve this, they waste themselves and their true creative powers on useless attempts to make themselves more comfortable by inappropriate means. but the real means are already provided and do not involve any effort at all on their part. The atonement is the only gift that is worthy of being offered at the altar of God because of the value of the altar itself. It was created perfect and is entirely worthy of receiving perfection. God and his creations are completely dependent on each other.
We're
He
going to,
depend.
Julie, we're going to thank you. I
Yep.
split the paragraphs here, so we'll hold off on that part. I didn't warn you, but we're going to get to that. So there's before and after. The truth is that perfect comfort, perfect trust, a sense of peace that is unchallengeable, unassailable, you're entitled to that. That's what it means to be unconditionally loved. So, but to do that, to be aware of that, requires a transformation of our ordinary consciousness, mind training. Until we achieve that, we miscreate and make idols of our own out of the materials of the world, and waste ourselves and our true creative powers on attempts to make ourselves happy by inappropriate means. And sometimes we fall in love with those attempts to make ourselves happy, whatever method we choose. That becomes our idols that we offer at the altar. So that's the before. But in the path of healing is that the answer has already been given and the means are already provided. Nothing new or unique is needed for anyone to heal. There's a universal plan of healing, and amazingly, it says does not involve any effort at all on your part, which really means you don't have to construct or build anew anything. You do need to make room and accept the plan, but you do not have to invent a new plan of healing. Although it seems to me in our world that there are thousands of people trying to invent plans for healing. And then many of them are trying to sell you on those plans for healing. The plan of atonement is a gift that is already given to you, already available to you. And this, if you're taking notes or mental notes, however you take them, this is very key. The only gift that is worthy of being offered at the altar is the atonement. That is your ticket to enter into union with your Creator, is your acceptance of your part in God's plan for the atonement. That's your ticket. Any other effort to gain access will result in a sense of littleness, and in what gifts from this world can you offer to the Creator that would really add up to anything? All right, so and it refers to this gift as a gift of perfection. The atonement is a plan that includes the restoration of the entire creation, the united will of the sonship, the restoration of all creation to a recognition of its perfect oneness together and with the Creator. It's a perfect gift. So it doesn't really involve any effort at all on your part. It does involve your to be gladly willing to accept, appreciate, and identify with the experience. And most people will say, well, gosh, I still don't know how to get there. Trust that the Holy Spirit will lead you step by step, week by week, as long as you continue in the right direction, she will guide you on your way. That is her mission, to guide you along this process and to help you, when you're ready, to clear away any obstacles that might interfere with your moving forward in acceptance of the atonement. Julie?
God and his creations are completely dependent on each other. He depends on them because he created them perfect. He gave them his peace so they could not be shaken and could not be deceived. Whenever you are afraid, you are deceived, and your mind cannot serve the Holy Spirit. This starves you by denying you your daily bread. God is lonely without his sons, and they are lonely without him. They must learn to look upon the world as a means of healing the separation. The atonement is the guarantee that they will ultimately succeed.
So, our part is that we must learn to see the world differently, to look upon our experience in the world, our life here, as a learning experience, as a means of healing the separation. This is more profound than the words might imply. So just, I'm going to step outside the Course of Miracles just for a second and talk about nihilism and a sense of meaninglessness and emptiness that pervades. In the after World War II, let's face it, Europe was shattered. It was devastated, and Japan as well. And there was a time of rebuilding and a sense of, not in the United States, because that's when we had, the United States was not attacked directly, so we still had our homes and factories intact. But in Europe, it would lay in rubble, and a sense of despair and hopelessness, understandably, set in, and a philosophical orientation of a sense of meaninglessness grew and grew and grew. And that sense of meaninglessness became more and more pervasive throughout the world and in the United States as well, from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and still remains so today. Many people have oriented themselves to the world with a sense of emptiness, hopelessness, with no sense of purpose. So we should say, just as a side note, simultaneously, the trust and adherence to traditional religious values went on the decline. So what people might have looked to in past for meaning was now no longer given as much significance, and there was nothing really to come in there. And so materialism and a sense of pseudo luxury was one form that people used to replace their empty sense of meaning. Well, it is essential for everyone, no matter how they look upon the world, that they must learn to look upon the world anew through a new lens and to see our life as the very means of healing the separation. This gives a new purpose to our time here on earth. And that purpose is not forever, because once we do heal, you no longer need once you heal, you're done healing. You no longer need that purpose. Uh, that and what goes on beyond then will take care of itself. It's only bright sunshine uh, beyond the experience of healing. But while we are here in this situation, we must adopt a purpose which is so all encompassing that it motivates our lives, makes us want to get up out of bed and contribute our part to God's plan. And so life becomes a means of healing the separation. The atonement is the big macro picture that guarantees that we will all ultimately succeed. Julie?
Thanks, Jonica. As you know, I've talked a lot about feeling uh, what's the point? And this is a setup. And just recently, I had a very humbling awareness about how, for me, that was just the biggest defense I could muster against living with my heart out in the open, because I was afraid of res- I was afraid of experiencing more heartbreak. And so for me, I realized that that's really all it was. And so I had a choice to make, because having been kind of exposed and dismantled and feeling significantly humbled by that, um, quickly, can I tell you how I got there?
Yeah, please.
A friend of mine decided to apply for some jobs, and this was just last weekend that she told me this. She applied for some jobs, and went on this one interview and came back, and we were all, "Oh, hey, how was it?" She goes, "Oh yeah, I mean it was all right. I'm not sure it's the right one." And she attended several other job interviews. Well, the first interview place, the one I just referenced, offered her the job. She was super excited and accepted it right away. And her husband said, "Hey, do you think that maybe you were just telling yourself you didn't want the job in case you didn't get it so you wouldn't be disappointed?" And I thought, holy God, that's how I walk through life. That's what my whole, Schopenhauer stuff is really, that identified myself as doing that exact thing. It was just another defense. That's
Julie,
all I
that's
got.
great. You recognize those are layers that many people never realize are driving their feelings and thoughts and decisions, and you're calling it out. All healing involves recognizing that and being willing to say, I don't want to continue using that defense mechanism. It's very, it's very deep too, as you can tell. The fact that that was a defense mechanism wasn't apparent, clear to your mind until now. And so that's why it takes some time in this depth psychology work that we're doing here before one is willing to not be afraid to acknowledge those things. And then that's when we begin the next phase of healing. It says, okay, that is a defense mechanism that I've worked long enough, and now it doesn't work for me anymore. And here's the thing, Julie, I have to add, humble, because you use the word humbly, and I don't know what to do instead, because all I know is practicing that defense mechanism. I've done it all my life. So, Holy Spirit, I'm going to have to trust you to guide me, because I've only got my past and I'm willing to become free now, but I don't know the way forward. So let's partner up in this healing journey with you being in charge of guiding me step by step on what to do. And all healing looks just like that. Something I didn't recognize I was doing becomes recognized, and we're willing to let it go, and then we're left with no understanding how to move forward, and we humbly turn to God to have us heal from those issues. So glad that you shared that, Julie. Thank you. So we're going to do, I was encouraged the other day with the idea of a summary. So I've prepared some ideas that relate to what we said today. So let's go over them. This altar can be viewed as the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God within you. It literally is an altar to the Creator where we can sit in the presence. Sit is in quotes, commune with the Spirit. It's where we hear the Holy Spirit most clearly. She speaks from this holy place, and it is a universal experience, that because the Creator has placed holiness within us, and this is where we come into fuller recognition of that holiness. And so the question really then becomes, what will you bring to the altar? You can bring your idols, or you can bring the atonement, because the altars are where you place your devotions. And we are intended to be devoted to oneness and wholeness and totality and sharing goodness and beauty and truth. But self-deceptions causes us to become confused, and we wind up bringing demigods, deceptions to the altar, thinking that that is worthy of our love. And so in this program, we teach that corrected perception, right perception, is needed before you can be clear-minded at the altar, and so before God can communicate directly to you at the altar. And then what we did emphasize that with that experience comes a repurposing of your mind. This is really profound. So just while we thought that our intellect, our decision making, was under our control, and that we were using it for some purpose that was perhaps not well defined, and ultimately became confused with the ego, and started using our intellect to pursue the ego's outcomes. Well, this correct perception and relationship with your inner light brings about spiritual vision, which then gives a new purpose to the mind, which is to serve as a means for healing yourself and others, healing the mind, healing the split of separation becomes the life purpose. And when we do that, it restores the power of the mind. It unites your conscious mind with your inner self. This is level clarity, Julie. When your conscious mind becomes clear that it wants to partner up with your holy mind, the two combined result in willpower creatively unleashed in a way that the mind serving the body could never achieve. So this is where imprisoned will becomes free willpower, because the atonement undoes the separation and restores the wholeness of the mind, which then results in all the fears and anxieties and a sense of inadequacies are replaced by a sense of safety, security, and trust. This is what we call wholeness. And friends, this is where your happiness lies. In the union of your conscious mind with your holy mind, a feeling of peace, safety, security, and trust, a sense of wholeness, and a purpose here in this world that is united with the plan of creation brings happiness. That's the formula. And we can look at that again in the future in other ways. So we've said all that. So I want to invite you. Oh my goodness, I've got all these other slides. I want to invite you to our next session, because in order to explore this work, even with that experience that Julie just shared, we have to be released from our own fears, or else we're never willing to take the steps forward into the healing journey. We have to recognize the fear comes from within and release ourselves from the inner prison. That will be the topic of our next session. Hope that you can join us either online or by video. So thank you all for your attention. Julie, thank you for your reading. And we will get together real soon. So God bless the inner light within you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste,
God bless
everyone.
you all.
Namaste.
Thanks, Jonica.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome.
Peace and love.
Thank you. Thank you.